Mark Melancon just led baseball with 39 saves, which is the first time that we did not have a closer with 40 saves since 1982. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Thursday, November 18th. Frank Stampfl, joined as always by Scotty Dubs, Scott White. And you guessed it, today we're focusing in on closers. We'll recap the position from this past season. We'll take a look at Scott's early 2022 relief pitcher rankings. Yes, we'll talk about Sparps a little bit as well for those who play in points leagues. Those are starting pitchers who have relief pitcher eligibility. A little bit of a cheat code there. We do have a few big pitching signings to talk about as well. Justin Verlander and Noah Syndergaard. And joining us on today's podcast, we have a special guest, a man who knows a thing or two about closers. He is a closer expert for The Athletic and has all these amazing closer charts, articles, podcasts that you can find over on his Patreon page. That's Reliever Recon, and it is Greg Jewett joining us now. What's going on, Greg?
Not too much. Honored to join you guys on this podcast, and looking forward to a great show. Closers are frustrating, but it's a labor of love.
Yeah, especially talking about closers in the middle of November, right? Like we were talking beforehand, what we're going to attempt to do today is nearly impossible, right? So we're just going to preface everything with that. Like we have no idea what's going to happen in the offseason. We could talk about what happened this year and take away a few things from that, but I'm sure we'll have, 5 to 10 different closer situations by the time we get to February, and then maybe a few different that change even after that. So what's going on, Scott? Are you ready to talk about closers?
At least as far as we know, you the way you broke that down. I mean, basically since the beginning of time, we could have said, okay, mid-November is too early to talk about closer roles because there's so many free agents. We don't know what teams are looking to upgrade the role. We don't know really if some of the late season guys who took over the role are going to stick in the role heading into next season. But what's different about kind of this era, kind of the last 2 or 3, 4 years, is that we don't know that even in April for most teams. Like how many teams anoint a closer officially before the season starts? We usually have a pretty good hunch who we expect the team's leading save guy to be, but we're kind of finding it out together as the season plays out. We just see what a manager starts to do, and okay, I guess this guy's the closer now. So, we'll know more in February and March than we do right now, but we won't know that much more.
And look, for those who play fantasy football, you know a thing or two about running back by committee. We have quite a few closer by committees as well. And you can see that reflected in the numbers. This past season, we had 198 different relievers with a save. And back in 2019, that was 199. That was more than 30 in 2018. So it seems like this is kind of where we're settling in now, where we have all these different kinds of relievers getting saves. And that's kind of just the way that the game is trending right now. But before we get back into closers and recapping relief pitchers, big news. Justin Verlander is back with the Houston Astros on a 1-year, $25 million deal, which is essentially a 2-year, $50 million deal because there's a $25 million player option for 2023. The last time we saw Verlander in a full season was 2019 when he had a 2.58 ERA, 0.80 whip, 300 strikeouts, finishing as the number 1 overall player in 5x5 Roto that season. I also think the fact, Scott, that the Astros were willing to give him this much money, essentially over 2 years, again, $50 million, tells you everything that you need to know about his health, right? We just saw the Dodgers decline to give a qualifying offer to Kershaw. The White Sox declined to give a qualifying offer to Carlos Rodon. A deal like this tells me you feel pretty good about Justin Verlander.
Yeah, I mean, particularly since it's with the team he had already been with, and they had the most insight into how his rehabilitation is going. I thought this was going to take a lot longer to play out because, even just earlier in the day, we kept hearing about all these teams that were interested. The White Sox, my Braves came up. There's one team after another. There's interest in Verlander here. And then all of a sudden he's signing with the Astros. And I mean, it's a good deal for a will-be 39-year-old coming off Tommy John surgery to get he's guaranteed at least $50 million, like you said, but he also has the option of opting out after that first year if he comes back like gangbusters and wants to try for another multi-year deal. There's a player option that second year. So like this is, you can understand why he he jumped at this deal. But considering the organization that offered it to him, yeah, I find that very encouraging. But I've been encouraged all along. I think I'm going to have a lot of shares of Verlander if I imagine in spring training we could see his draft stock skyrocket when people are actually seeing him pitch again.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to snap him up anywhere I can before then.
Yeah, there's already reports that he's throwing 97 miles per hour. I know we had a showcase recently where multiple teams attended, and all reports were pretty good out of there. I was talking with a few people on Twitter earlier on Wednesday night and talking about how his NFBC ADP is so low right now. It's like in the 12th round of 15-team leagues. And I think that's going to shoot up now that he has a team. He's going back to the team that he was on. Familiarity there. Greg, by the way, doesn't just focus on closers, right? Like he plays fantasy baseball. He knows a thing or two. We're in Tout Wars together in the head-to-head points league. So, Greg, what are your thoughts on Justin Verlander turning 39 years old in February, coming back from Tommy John surgery? He'll be 18 months removed from that surgery by the time we get to spring training. Can you see yourself being in on someone like Justin Verlander?
I think so. And we just, temper expectations. I'm not going to expect 2019 to crystallize. However, everyone's looking for people that can rack up innings. Now, he knows his body, and Houston should know his body than anybody, but better than Kate Upton otherwise at this point. So, we've got him coming back, and even if he's only going to give me 5 innings at maybe at the beginning of the season, and he starts ramping it up as the season goes on, and gets up into those things. I know you and I in Tout Wars, we're hunting for quality starts. So, I mean, this is somebody that has a track record of working into games, so that's going to make him a lot more enviable in that sort of a format. And the other thing here we have to like is we know he's going to a team that has winning pedigree, and that helps. We can't chase wins, but we can chase pitchers on good teams that are in situations to garner them. So, I think he steps right in, and they have enough pitching depth where if he needs to take a turn off or, out of the rotation for, take one time off, they can do that. So they won't probably press him into too many 2-start situations early in the season, kind of let him ease into it. So, we've seen these veterans in other bodies. Lance Lynn eats up innings. I don't think he's going to be quite to that level of innings pitched, but if you get him in a 3.50 ERA with a whip around 1 or a little higher, definitely. I mean, that I think his ADP was like 172 on average right now. That'll be inside the hundreds by the time we're all getting going in March.
Yeah, I think so too. By the way, Noah Syndergaard signed a 1-year, $21 million deal as well with the Angels, who are desperate for pitching themselves. And I'm not sure how much we take away. He threw 2 innings this past season, but his fastball velocity was down 3 miles per hour. He didn't throw any breaking pitches. Scott, your thoughts on Noah Syndergaard to the Angels?
Yeah, not as excited about Noah Syndergaard for a few different reasons. One, it's his second Tommy John surgery, and the track record for that isn't as good. You mentioned his velocity was way down for the little tiny bit we saw him pitch. Still, is down significantly. So it's something to consider. And then even beyond that, I mean, his last 2 seasons before having the second Tommy John, not as dominant as you probably think they were. Just a little more than a strikeout per in each of them. And in that second season, he had an ERA over 4. The whip was above 1.2 in both of them. It wasn't exactly an ace, and maybe his elbow was already deteriorating at that point. And it's possible, but we're talking about a sample of more than 50 starts. I would say of the big pitchers coming back from Tommy John surgery, Verlander, Luis Severino, Mike Clevinger, and Syndergaard. Syndergaard is my least favorite of that group.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I mean, we haven't seen Clevinger pitch in a while too. I will say, just like Verlander, I think if all of these guys look good in spring training, like we're probably going to see all of their ADPs on the rise. Syndergaard's ADP as of now, 196.7. There's only been 7 drafts done over on the NFBC. But he's going pretty late. We'll see if Noah Syndergaard can bounce back. I want to run through these news items a little bit quicker here so we can get to everything we need to do at the relief pitcher position. Jose Barrios agreed to a 7-year, $131 million extension with the Blue Jays on Tuesday. So he's not going anywhere in 12 starts with the Blue Jays this past season. 3.58 ERA, 109 whip, 78 strikeouts over 70 1/3 for Jose Barrios. Brandon Belt, the only person to accept the qualifying offer and will remain with the Giants. for 1 year, $18.4 million. Belt was 15th in Scott's early first base rankings. I assume it stayed that way, right?
Yes. Yeah. I wanted to see him leave San Francisco, both because it's stifled his power over the course of his career. Now, maybe that's not as big of an issue as it used to be. It's played fairer the past couple of years. He just set a career high in home runs in only 97 games. But beyond that, I would have liked to see him go somewhere where he has some hope of playing every day, because I think under Gabe Kapler, he's not often going to start against lefties. So that's going to keep him out of the top 12 at first base, even though I think he has top 12 ability.
Yep. Gabe Kapler, by the way, won National League Manager of the Year. So shout out to him. Kevin Cash won the American League Manager of the Year. Raisel Iglesias did not accept the qualifying offer, becoming a free agent. We'll have more on him later on. And the Cy Young Award winners were announced. Mr. Tight Pants himself, Robbie Ray, won it in the American League, and well-deserved. Shout out to Adam Azer. Again, I will always bring this up. His bold prediction last year in the shortened season, Robbie Ray would finish top 3 in the National League Cy Young Award voting when he was on the Diamondbacks. That did not happen. This year, he goes out and he wins the award. So how about that? Corbin Burns won it in the National League, causing some controversy on Twitter. I really don't think it's very controversial myself. Burns had a higher WAR in 50 less innings pitched, and I think he was clearly the best starting pitcher outside of Jacob.
Which version of WAR? I'm pretty sure Wheeler had a higher WAR, according to Baseball Reference.
Well, I was using Fangraphs, Scott. So
yeah,
I don't know what the difference.
Fangraphs has the inferior WAR, at least for pitchers.
Oh.
I think. But anyway, like it was very close between the 3 finalists, Burns, Wheeler, and Scherzer. I mean, it was very close in terms of vote, and I think very close in terms of them meeting the criteria. And frankly, Buehler was a not so distant 4th, Walker Buehler. So it was a really tight race between the 4 of them. I would have probably gone Wheeler. I might have gone Scherzer over Burns too, but I don't have a problem with Burns winning.
Yep. All right. Well, let's get past the news here. Shout out to those guys. Congrats to them. This Sunday, it's week 11 on the NFL on CBS, and there are plenty of games with playoff implications, including Lamar Jackson leading the Ravens against the Bears and the Bengals battling the Raiders. We'll get you ready for all of the day's action at noon Eastern with JB and the guys on the NFL Today. That's all this Sunday on CBS. The state of the closer. Greg Jewett is still here. We're going to get him back in. We'll work him back in here. The league saves the last 5 seasons. It's kind of bounced around, but it's been between 1,276 and 1,180 each of the past 5 full seasons. So from 2016 through 2021. So, we're looking at a range of about 100 saves, and it's taken a step back. I don't know that it's really taken the step back that everyone's making it out to be. What we're losing really is stud closers, right? Like guys that are just racking up a ton of saves, which, as I mentioned, Mark Melancon just led the league in saves with 39. But back in 2019, it was Kirby Yates with 41. But the year before that, it was Edwin Diaz with 57. In 2016, it was Jarius Familia with 51. So we're kind of like losing out on those stud closers. Greg, this is like a loaded question. You could take it whatever direction you want to. But what is the state of the closer in fantasy baseball today, in your opinion?
The state of the closer today is, as you alluded to, the good news is when you're in these leagues that the total saves to compete is down. So we were running the numbers from the main event and the draft champions. So like the 70th percentile now, you're in the 68 range to be in that area and score well. So if you get an anchor, like one of these studs that you're alluring to, or at least somebody that has a clear path to saves, those become much more alluring, and they're going faster. The early NFBC, it started a little slow, but one of the drafts I saw the other day, it's not completed yet, but Liam Hendricks went in the 2nd round on the turn. So, I mean, that's a little aggressive to me, but
it's crazy.
I think some people just are saying, you know what? I'm getting my 35 saves right there, and I can take a couple of late darts later. And as long as I accumulate 60 plus saves, then I'm in the 70th percentile. And I think that's how a lot of these people are going to start viewing this. We always hear the don't pay for saves, but I think we're morphing into a phase with as much as you're saying maybe I don't want to pay for saves, you're saying I want to pay for somebody that I know at least has the role. So Will Smith all of a sudden is going to have more value with Atlanta than say a closer on another team that might give you better ratios or strikeouts that's in a shared role. These are all of those things, and then the ancillary saves guys. So we're going to talk about our oldest Chapman. So if you take Chapman, do you have to take in a draft champions or a league with limited pickups? Do I have to take Chad Green? Do I have to take Jonathan Loizaga? Am I going to canvas a whole bullpen, or am I just going to take a couple of people? So the state of the closer is basically it's in flux, and the fantasy players are adjusting to it, and that's what's kind of helped create my niche. And our goal is to make sure that you're trying to stay a week ahead of these trends, and that's the key. If you're getting a guy a week before or 2 weeks before he's getting that job for $1 bid, you're saving that precious free agent money for other resources and how to do those things. And you just have to know. And we talk about how coaches view running backs. We're almost getting into the same thing. We're looking at how managers treat closers. So we know, okay, Seattle's morphing into Tampa Bay of the Northwest. So maybe I don't want to dip my toe into that bullpen. I'm going to go somewhere else where there's again the clear pathway. That's kind of like what we want, linear past the saves. As much as Aaron Boone drives Yankee fans crazy, he likes A to B to C, and that's his 7, 8, 9. And those are the situations that we're looking to find.
Yeah, and of course, when we're talking about this chase for saves, it's mostly in 5x5 roto leagues where, saves is one of the traditional categories that we're playing with there. Same thing in head-to-head categories leagues. I would imagine many people are still playing with saves, though some people, have transitioned into saves plus holds, which at that point, you're more so just looking for skills, right? Like the best relievers, ERA, strikeouts, so on and so forth. In points leagues, again, which we will mention at some point in this podcast, we'll have a few relief pitcher eligible pitchers who are starting pitchers. So obviously they give you a little bit more volume and are more useful in that format. Let's go on to the year in review and just basically look at the top 20 at the position using 5x5 roto finish. Number 1, no surprise here, Liam Hendricks. He actually got better according to the underlying numbers. Career best 1.57 Sierra, a 1.91 expected ERA, and he has the third most saves since 2019. That is 77. Number 3, we'll talk about here, just kind of lump these guys in together. But Josh Hader, he actually has the most saves since 2019. And Scott, I think it's basically just a coin flip. It's like 1A and 1B between Hendricks and Hader up at the top.
Yeah, it is. I do prefer Hader. He's quite a bit younger. Hendricks is going to be 33 at the start of next year. You never know when the skills are going to diminish, especially since he relies so heavily on the fastball. Hendricks does appear to have a volume advantage just in terms of how much he pitches, but that's pretty recent. As in this year, Hader's innings fell off, and I don't know if that's going to be a long-standing trend. But if you did prefer Hendricks, that would probably be the reason why.
Look, Greg, I don't know if you have anything else to add to these guys. I mean, it seems like there's a very clear tier above everyone else. You mentioned, I've seen a few 15-team leagues where they're going in like the early third round. It seems very aggressive. I understand why, like, finding saves is so hard, but I'm never going to be the person to do it. It's just, I've never tried it, and I don't think I want to. It's just, It throws things off when you take a reliever in the third round.
Yeah, I was willing to take them in like the 5th and a 12-teamer last year. I was willing to be that guy, but I'm not sure I'm willing to be the third round guy in a 15-teamer. That's steep. But you're paying for that. And to Scott's point, Milwaukee Hader, I've read 3 different articles with the interviews at the postseason, and he was saying how much he felt fresher pitching 1 inning outing. So if he stays with Milwaukee, I think that's pretty much going to be the norm. They just need Devin Williams to stay healthy and not punch a wall, and have those last 2 innings shored up for them.
Greg, do you have a preference between the two?
No, I do not. I would be willing to take them, like I said, if they're there. Last year, I was more on Hendricks just because I thought that the White Sox were going to really maybe use them for more 4-out saves and things of that nature. But yeah, I still think that Hader has the better swing and miss stuff, and as Scott alluded to, with the youth on his side as long as he stays in Milwaukee, I'm okay with it. If there was ever, and I know we talk about this ad nauseum, but if there was ever a year that Milwaukee was going to trade him, this would be it. He's entering, his second arbitration year. I believe they project him to get $10 million in his arbitration hearing. So that starts to get a little rich for a team that prefers to keep the salary down.
All right, so something to pay attention to there. If Josh Hader is shipped out, I'm guessing Devin Williams is probably the next man up there. But let's see what happens with the Brewers. Sandwiched in between those guys was actually Raisel Iglesias, who finished as the number 2 reliever this past season in fantasy. Saved his best for age 31, 2.57 ERA, 0.93 WHIP, a career high 33% K- walk rate. He has the 3rd most saves in baseball since 2017. He is a free agent, turning down the qualifying offer, but I'm assuming, maybe I shouldn't assume this, but I think that he winds up a closer somewhere, Scott.
Yeah, I would assume so. I would hope so. I'm certainly ranking him as such, and I imagine he's going to command the sort of salary that basically makes it obvious, right? That okay, we're signing this guy to hold down the 9th inning. Yeah, he feels like one of the most bankable closers. He's coming off of his I believe it's his first 100 strikeout season as a full-time reliever, which is a nice milestone number. And has been doing it for long enough that I don't have much reason to. There's nothing really to denigrate here with Raisel Iglesias. I think I personally am going to prefer. I'm forgetting his name. Cleveland's closer.
Emmanuel Clase.
Yeah, Emmanuel Clase. Thank you. I think I'm going to prefer him to Iglesias because now that James Karinchak, I mean, he seems to be the guy, maybe the pitcher who has suffered the most from the foreign substance crackdown because he just didn't have it anymore. When his spin rates were down and he got sent to the minors, his strikeout rate was way down before that happened. So I don't think James Karinchak is a threat to Emmanuel Clase at all. I think Terry Francona has shown he likes those locked-in roles. Clase certainly had that once Karinchak fell off, and stuff is so nasty, like gives up such weak contact. Like I think Raisel Iglesias, having always been kind of vulnerable to the long ball, I think there's a chance his ERA ends up kind of highish, and I don't think that's going to happen with Class A. There always seems to be a stretch during the season, and it was this past April actually for Iglesias. He had a 6 ERA where we're like, is Iglesias? People forget this because the final numbers always look good for him, but there's always a stretch during the season where it looks like Iglesias is on shaky ground. I don't want to make too much of that because there are only so many stable closers out there. But if I'm just nitpicking who's going to be my 3rd closer, that's why I prefer Class A to Iglesias.
I don't know, Scott. I don't know. That one hurts me. That one hits me right in the heart.
I know. I may end up caving on that because I feel like I'm way out on a limb with it, and everybody's just going to laugh at me. That's my feeling right now. Hey, you laugh at that, Greg? Does that sound like a bad thought process?
We've been following each other a long time. He knows last year after I had Clase as one of my sleeper picks in the Athletic in the preseason as somebody that you could stash and possibly mine saves from as the year went on. So I kind of took him under my wing. So every save I was tweeting out #Clase closed and putting a number down with the stuff. So we'll get into some of his numbers a little later because I know Frank was asking about how I felt about him. And you made the perfect point with Karinchak as far as, I remember there was a video, and we don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but there was a video I saw where there was like a white substance, and then that was, right before the sticky substance crackdown. And I ignored the fact, along with many people, that Karinchak had double percentage walk rates all the way through the minor leagues. Then all of a sudden he came up last year and was lights out throwing strikes everywhere. And it's like, why didn't the light bulb turn on and be like, what was going on here? How can you go from a double-digit walk rate for 4 years in the minors or however long it was, and you come up and now you've got a 5% walk rate. So all of that stuff kind of came crashing down on him. I do think Karinchak will bounce back this year, but I think that they will use him, and I like to refer to as the HLR, the highest leverage reliever. So he'll come in the 7th or the 8th, put out a fire at that point, and then Clase can close out the game in the 9th for Francona.
Yeah, I mean, Class A was just so good in the role, right? 24 saves. It seems like he's earned the right to at least to start the season with quite a bit of confidence for Cleveland next year.
A 1.29 ERA.
Yeah, no, he was amazing. We'll talk about Class A a little bit more later on. Number 4 at the position. We're only up to 4, so let's go, guys. Let's do this. Kenley Jansen.
Class A already. All right.
Kenley Jansen, 34 years old and still dominating. 2.22 ERA, his lowest since 2017. Underlying numbers say, all right, maybe he was a bit lucky here. Fastball velo, highest of his career. You like to see that. He's a free agent. Greg, I'll go to you on this one. I assume he's back with the Dodgers. We don't know for sure, but let's say that he is. Would you trust Kenley Jansen?
I was nervous about him last year. The one thing I will say, along with the velo bump, was he threw more sliders this year. The Dodgers finally convinced him that he couldn't just keep throwing the cutter. So I think that increased his swing strike percentage a little bit and made him a little bit more effective pitcher this year. But yeah, I think if he's with the Dodgers, then I will be willing to take him. If he ends up with another organization, I'll probably move him down my ranks a couple of spots just because Dave Roberts really trusted him in that role. And that's one of those situations we have to keep a close eye on because, we don't have Blake Trinan ranked anywhere because he's not the closer. But if for some reason Jansen decides to take money from somewhere else, or if he thinks he's going to get, 2 or 3 year deal, and maybe the Dodgers are saying 1 or 2, however that works out, down all of a sudden Trinan's going to be jumping into the top 10 in a lot of people's lists. Yeah,
and rightfully so. Number 5 at the position was Ranger Suarez, who, Scott, I believe will have SPARP eligibility next year, right, for points leagues?
Yeah. He spent most of the year in the bullpen. I think 4 of the 6 months, 3.5, something like that. So yeah, he made plenty of appearances there. He'll be relief pitcher eligible still, and he'll be especially attractive in points leagues because of that.
And especially attractive just to Scott in general, because he loves the guy. He loves Ranger Suarez. We spoke about him quite a bit on the Starting Pitcher podcast. Number 6 was Alex Reyes. He was the Cardinals closer for the first 4 months of the season. It sounds like they want to try him out again in the starting rotation. So we will also skip Alex Reyes for now. I don't think that we need to talk about him from a bullpen perspective right now. Jordan Romano was number 7 at the position and started with Julian Merriweather in Toronto, and the stuff looked awesome. So I couldn't really blame people for spending a bunch of fab on Merriweather that first week or so of the season. But then he got hurt. We had a little bit of Rafael Dolis in there. Eventually, Romano emerged, and Scott, he was awesome. 2.14 ERA, 105 whip, 23 saves. The only thing that I worry, and again, it's mid-November, is the Blue Jays are trying to compete. Maybe they bring someone else in with more experience. But yeah, Romano showed us enough where if they want to just go with him, I think that's perfectly fine as well.
Yeah, that is the concern. That's exactly it. Is the Blue Jays seem? It seems like they're linked to everybody this offseason. They already gave Barrios a 7-year deal, Jose Barrios. So they're pushing in their chips. I could definitely see them wanting to improve their bullpen, and if they get a Kenley Jansen or Raisel Iglesias or trade for Craig Kimbrel or whatever, that would probably bump Romano back to his setup role, and it would be sad because he looks like he has the potential to be a really high-end closer in fantasy. That's how I'm ranking him right now because they haven't made that move yet. But that could change. We could see him lose a lot of value. I also want to point out with Jordan Romano, like once Kirby Yates got hurt early last season, before the start of the season, everybody pointed at Romano as the next in line. And remember, it didn't happen right away.
Yep.
Julian Merriweather got those early chances, and Romano got dropped in a lot of really deep leagues. And that's sort of the problem with relief pitchers. You don't have any. It's not like you have a bunch more roster spots to stash prospective guys away, but it can change so quickly, and we're all just kind of flying by our seat of our pants during the season because no manager is really tipping their hand to show us what they're thinking. We got the impression it was Julian Merriweather. Maybe if Julian Merriweather hadn't gotten hurt, it would have stayed Julian Merriweather. We don't know. But if it eventually did become Romano, people who were patient with him, it paid big dividends, and those who weren't, it paid big dividends for somebody else because he was great from the time he took over as the closer.
Yeah, and there's a lot of gamesmanship too, right? Like, when a manager is asked about a bullpen, late inning roles, and who's the closer and whatever, like they could say whatever they want to try and throw off opposing teams. You don't know who you're going to get in the 8th inning, the 9th inning, whatever it might be. So there's gamesmanship involved there. And I haven't mentioned this yet, but closer by committee sucks for fantasy. It's super frustrating, but I 100% understand why teams do it, right? Like just play the matchups. It makes perfect sense for them.
I think, and Greg, I mean, you may disagree with this, but there are some closer committees. There are a few teams out there, the Rays, the Mariners, probably a couple others. The Orioles, not like they get enough save chances to matter, but it does seem to be an actual saves closing tandem between several pitchers. But for the majority of the teams, it's less that than just them being non-committal about it. They will find a guy who's working for them, and they will stick with that guy until it's not working for them anymore, which makes it even more frustrating in a way because, if you don't land on the guy for the 2-month window he's a closer, you get nothing out of him. That feels like more what's happening than really a true committee or tandem situation.
And what I think is the hardest thing to do is when people are doing their bidding on Sunday night. I don't want to be NFBC only, but or Saturday night. However, we seem to always be chasing the saves that already happened, and we don't get them. You need to be chasing the saves that are coming down the road. And people really need to change that approach, So, yes, when Merriweather had those back-to-back saves against the Yankees, everybody opened up the wallet that weekend and spent on him. But again, this was a guy that he has a long history of being injured. He's got electric stuff, but we never know how long he's going to last. So those are the things we have to bake into all of these decisions. It's not just like, I got to go get that guy. He was great against the Yankees. You have to look at all of the factors and how it's going to come down. I remember at the beginning, before the season, the Reds told us, they came out and said more than once, we are going to be a matchup-based bullpen. We're not going to have a closer. And Amir Garrett told the world, I'm the closer, and people bought into it. And he wasn't the closer. If a team tells you there's not going to be a closer, I will believe them at the beginning and then let them prove me wrong. So I made it a point in 2021. I had 0 Reds relievers on my roster. I just said, no, thanks. Even there was a couple of times Sims was hot, got 6 in a row, whatever. But it killed me because I love TJ Antone coming into the season. But when they said all that stuff, it's like, how can you do it? So I shifted my spark from TJ Antone to Freddie Peralta, which I thought I was getting a 100-inning reliever, but it worked out that I had I ended up with a very good starter, and I had him in tout as well. I took him just because he had the relief eligibility, but he turned out being like a cornerstone for my team.
Well, Greg, I wish you would have hit me up and told me that, not to spend on any of the Reds because, every week I'm trying to pick up Reds and spending like $50 on Lucas Sims here and there. And God, it was just such a mess.
That's the thing is it's a committee till it isn't. And I do wonder if Amir Garrett wasn't terrible from the start, if he might have been the closer.
But we'll never know.
This is kind of off topic, but we don't have Greg on all the time. So I want to ask, because yes, I mean, I get the idea of you'd rather anticipate this guy's going to become a closer maybe in the future. So let me invest this very small amount to stash him away. But you only have so much roster space. Mm-hmm. How long do you stick with the guy? Because I know in Tout Wars this past year, Jose Cisnero at one point, I thought, okay, nobody's really getting it done for the Tigers. Maybe he's the guy to stash away. Of course, Chad Green for the Yankees, stashed him away for a while, just kept never happening. I could give you a long list of guys that I tried. But at some point, when you're not getting the saves, you have to move on. And that's what I struggle with, is knowing how long do I trust this guy's eventually going to get me saves? Because of course there's no guarantee he will. And there there's an option for every team almost who could potentially be next in line for saves.
Mhm. Yeah, of course. I mean, and that's a multi-layered question, but what we're trying to get our head around is opportunity, um, what the team usually does, and then how he's pitching. So it's like, all right, I can be frustrated that I was stashing Chad Green, but he also won 10 games last year. I mean, so there's still value in, middle relievers on good teams. There's value in those guys. I'd rather have Chad Green all season than any of the guys that poor Frank was spending $50 on from Cincinnati, because he's still got 10 wins and 6 saves. I mean, put that up against anybody in the Reds bullpen, that comes out ahead. And Green had 99 strikeouts. Only 5 relievers last year had 100 or more strikeouts. You alluded to Iglesias eclipsing that mark earlier. So there is a little window of those, especially if it's a 15 team or a league only format. Those guys, all of a sudden, I think they're almost an underutilized asset. And I know Jeff Zimmerman he would look at guys that weren't pitched on, say, Friday and Saturday, and he would try and, add them for a small amount of money for the week ahead on those types of teams. So you pick up a Chad Green instead of using a 5th starter from a bad team trying to stream a win. Use a middle reliever on a good team like Chad Green, and he might get you 4 good innings, get you 6 strikeouts, and he might pick up a cheap vulture win. To me, that seems like almost a better gambit than when I'm picking a guy on the Pirates because he has a good matchup against a team, then he gets blitzed. But as far as patience, you really have to watch usage. If he gets pigeonholed in the 7th inning and he's not moving up into the 8th, or he doesn't get a chance to finish a game after you've stashed him for a couple of weeks and you need that spot for an injury or whatever, then you can move on. But if you see that his game leverage index is going up, or he's getting a higher trusted or more high leverage innings, like say Jonathan Loizaga last year, you might want to hold him just in case, because you get those ancillary saves. The deeper the league, any save matters. So those are the things we're thinking about.
All right, let's hit a quick break. And when we return, we'll get back to recapping the position, top 15 or top 20 or so. And then we'll look at Scott's rankings here on Fantasy Baseball Today. All right, so number 8 at the position was Emmanuel Clase. We talked about him already. Number 9 was Craig Kimbrel, and he was ridiculous with the Cubs as their closer. And then he struggled with the White Sox as their setup man. Scott, the White Sox picked up Craig Kimbrel's $16 million option, but the expectation is that he is going to be traded. Again, a lot of assumption going on this podcast, but if a team is willing to give up something for Craig Kimbrel, I think it's fair to say that he's going to be their closer.
Yeah, I mean, although the White Sox gave up one of their top prospects to get him, and then he wasn't their
Also
closer.
true.
But hopefully
true.
the league learned from that, because it doesn't seem like Kimbrel is as effective without that adrenaline rush of pitching the 9th inning. At least I think that's what happened, right? Because he was pretty shaky in the years leading up to what seemed like him getting back on track in 2021. I had some control issues. I know there were some health issues in there as well. But Kimbrel had really fallen off as just in terms of his stature as a reliever. And, it wasn't so obvious that he deserved to be closing even for the Cubs. But then he was awesome again all of a sudden, and then he got traded and he was terrible again. So I suspect he'll be traded to a place where he's closing. Certainly we want to see him go anywhere but where he is. But I would say his fantasy stock is very much up in the air until that happens. If he does get traded to a place where he'll obviously be closing, probably rounding out the top 10 with the upside to be top 3, but right now it remains to be seen.
I've heard the Phillies rumored already with Craig Kimbrel. We'll see what happens there. I think the Red Sox could definitely use him, and obviously he's got some familiarity with that team. I was thinking maybe the Padres are a possibility. He's been there before, and Mark Melanson's a free agent. Maybe the Mariners if they want someone with experience, but we'll follow Craig Kimbrel, see what happens here. Greg, I'm going to throw 2 names your way. Ryan Presley, he winds up with 26 saves. He was awesome, great ERA, great whip, underlying numbers, really like him. And Edwin Diaz, he was solid, 3.45 ERA. Maybe you want that to be a little bit lower, but 32 saves, lots of strikeouts, Swinging strike rate came back down a little bit, but I think both of these guys are fine. Ryan Presley, Edwin Diaz, top 10 options. I don't really worry about them very much.
No, I agree. And, it's fun when you look at Presley's save total, you're like, God, he was on Houston. What they win 95 games. You're like, how did he only get 26 saves? But then you look into their record. They had 36 wins by 5 runs or more last year. So they were 36 and 12 in blowouts, but they were only 21 and 19 in 1-run games. So they played so many games ahead that it depressed his save total. But that stuff's goofy, so I'm sure that'll come back to earth a little bit. So I'm not too worried. I'm not worried about either one of those. And Diaz, he's just, I know the post gets on him every once in a while. He makes the back pages. He goes through like these 1 or 2 week stretches where his mechanics get wonky, and then he comes back then he gets back into a groove, and then he's fine.
Yeah, I think people will look at those 26 saves from Presley, and it might suppress his value. But I agree, it's not something you should expect to happen again, especially since his manager is Dusty Baker, and he was locked in as the closer from the start of the year to the end of the year, and he only got 26 saves. Like, that just seems like a massive fluke.
Mark Melancon was number 12 at the position, 2.23 ERA, but a 1.22 whip. Those things don't really line up together here. And Scott, I just feel like his skill set is so worrisome. Pitching to contact, doesn't get a lot of strikeouts here. He's turning 37 in March. Maybe he gets another opportunity to close somewhere. He probably will, but he struggled a little bit down the stretch. I'm pretty worried because I feel like someone that old, and his skill set, it could just fall off like that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's an extensive track record. You understand why he profiles the way he does, because he's less of a bat misser than a extreme ground ball generator, which can lead to a low ERA with a kind of high whip. That's not anything unusual. I think he'll probably sign somewhere to close. It's not a slam dunk because obviously there are much more dominant relievers out there, but just some contender is going to sign him to be their proven 9th inning guy, and he'll rack up saves probably. Will it be a league leading total again? That's impossible to predict. I would kind of doubt it. So I don't have him ranked particularly high going into next season. But if you're just looking to get a bunch of saves, I mean, I don't know that he's any less safe than anyone else who is really locked into the role as the 9th inning guy.
Number 13 at the position was Will Smith, Scotty, from your World Series winning Atlanta Braves. 3.44 ERA, 1.13 whip. He had 37 saves. He had 6 blown saves. He had 7 losses, but he's still getting paid a decent amount next season, and he performed in the playoffs. He had 6 saves. He did not allow a run in the postseason. So, Greg, all those things combined, I feel pretty safe saying that Will Smith will once again be the Atlanta Braves closer, at least to start.
I agree. And again, the one thing we don't know is who's going to sign what when all of those free agency moves start happening. But you see Melancon's name linked. They're even saying maybe going back to San Francisco, not as a closer, just to be a high leverage arm. So Melancon thought he was going to San Diego, supposedly to play for a contender, which everybody was tweeting about once Atlanta won the World Series, kind of like, how's that feel now? But we'll see. So, yeah, I'm more. I treat Melancon with trepidation, but I would be more than happy to get Will Smith as. I wouldn't mind him as my first closer. I mean, at least I know I have somebody again entrenched in the role. Give me 30 saves, and then I'll figure out the rest.
All right, number 14 at the position was Chad Green. He was the Yankee setup man. Bunch of strikeouts, 6 saves. Greg mentioned the 10 wins. I will say this, and this is just my Yankee fandom homerism coming out. Chad Green in high leverage sucks. Like, the guy, the biggest spot in the game, comes up, does the exact opposite of what you need him to do. 1-run game, gives up a solo homer. Like, I'm telling you, it was so frustrating watching this guy. He's got good stuff, but
this is your most Adam Azer moment ever. I feel like Adam Azer is back hosting this podcast.
He was so I'm telling you, it's weird too, because the numbers are good. He's got great numbers, but just in the worst spots, the guy would just mess up all the time. Anyway, let's move on from Chad. 15th at the position was Paul Sewald. He came out of nowhere, 3.06 ERA, 5th highest K percentage in baseball. He had 11 saves. Greg, I'll go back to you on this one. What are you thinking with the Mariners bullpen as of now?
I'm going to avoid him. That's just another situation. There's too many darts. I mean, heck, the Steckenrider was pretty much the closer down the stretch in September, and they might have to trade him because they have too many arms. They've got Ken Giles coming back from surgery this year. They've got Andres Munoz. He was hitting 100 miles per hour at the end of the season in the minors. So, I mean, this, you want to talk about a bullpen. Any contender that's looking to trade, this is where it's at. But they can hold them for a little bit. And if for some reason Seattle doesn't compete, then they'll trade Giles and they'll just move up the next guy. They've really modeled themselves almost like the Rays. They're just, so Sewell is going to probably be the highest leverage reliever, the HLR, which means he'll get some saves, he'll get some wins, and he'll help your ratios and strikeouts. But you can't take him just to be a closer. So in an NFBC draft and hold, probably the only one I would take was like probably Andres Munoz in the 40th round, and maybe I can get 10 saves in the second half if they trade Giles. But otherwise, for me, I don't know how you guys are, but I'll let somebody else try and figure out that dartboard.
Oh man, like they still have Drew Steckenrider. I completely forgot they have Ken Giles on the roster, right? So they signed him to a 2-year deal.
They signed him to a 2-year deal, so this year will be the year he pitches. Yeah.
But they still have Diego Castillo on the roster. They have Ken Giles now. Andres Munoz, as you mentioned, like the guy was a flamethrower coming up for the Padres a couple of years ago. Wow. Like Scott, I didn't realize the Mariners had that many guys.
Yeah, no, they do. And I actually rank Steckenrider the highest right now because it seemed like, obviously I was monitoring the services bullpen management pretty closely all season, Scott Services. And it seemed like that's the guy he was kind of leaning toward more in the ninth inning. He got, let's see, 5 of the team's final 7 saves. The other 2 going to Paul Sewald, of course. But, I mean, Sewald is the most talented. Ken Giles is right there, obviously, if he gets back to full health. So it could change very quickly. And I don't feel great about ranking Steckenrider the highest, to be honest. But that's who I'm thinking is going to be the lead saves guy, at least in April.
Yes. And again, it's November 18th. So
yeah.
Well, we won't hold you to it, Scott. 16th and 17th, I'll throw both of these your way, Scotty. Aroldis Chapman, talked about him a little bit. He had a 4.95 ERA from June 1st on, which was when they started to crack down on the sticky substance situation. And it seemed very similar to James Karinchak, right? Like these guys are both fireballers, but half the time they don't know where the ball is going. So it seems like Chapman might have actually been affected by that. And it's pretty scary. He's turning 34 years old in February as well. And I'll also throw Giovanni Gallegos your way. Finally got a shot, 14 saves down the stretch. Seems like, at least to start for the Cardinals, he will be the guy for them.
Well, maybe. I mean, they made a change at manager, so it's kind of back to square one, it feels like. The thing about that makes moving Gallegos into the closer role difficult is the guy eats a lot of innings, a lot of leverage innings. So if you're confining him to the 9th inning, you're probably sacrificing some quality innings from a really dependable pitcher. So I can understand why they've hesitated to move him there. I don't think we're going to see Alex Reyes back in the role, whether or not he wins a rotation spot. Jordan Hicks, he's supposedly competing for a rotation spot too. It's hard to see it's hard to see them going with Hicks over Gallegos to begin the year, but I could definitely see them fading Gallegos if somebody else emerges who's capable of handling the 9th inning.
As you're sitting here talking about this almost feels like the exact sort of team that Melancon would go to. He won't be expensive.
Yeah.
They have a great infield, so he can just throw cutters and let him hit ground balls over to Nolan Arenado or whoever they get to be shortstop. And as you said, I said this last year. I was on a show with Justin and Paul Sporer and a few others, and I was like, I love Gallegos, but I don't like how St. Louis uses them because, as you said, they like him in the 7th or 8th, or at that moment they need him the most. They never really put him in the 9th because they figured they could just piece that together. So as we're talking about, almost the light bulb just kind of went on. I'm like, oh, this almost feels like where Melancon could end up, but we'll never know. But I agree with your sentiment about Gallegos.
Yep. All right, 18, 19, and 20 we'll get to here, and then we've got like 10 minutes left to talk about rankings, but it's fine. We've honestly talked about a lot of the guys that are on the rankings list anyway. But 18th was Andrew Kittredge. He had an awesome year for the Tampa Bay Rays, but we know the deal with Tampa Bay. They had 14 different relievers pick up a save last season, 6 different relievers with multiple saves for Tampa Bay. Jake McGee at 19, he was the closer for most of the year for the Giants. Camilo Doval was awesome in September, and it seemed like he was the closer, or at least a 9th inning reliever in the postseason as well. And then 20th was Matt Barnes, who had an absolutely brutal second half, 6.48 ERA, an xFIP over 5. Hansel Robles had 3 saves for the Red Sox in September, but he's now a free agent. It seems like they really like Garrett Whitlock, but I have to imagine the Red Sox invest something in the back end of their bullpen. We just don't know what that something is yet. So, Greg, what do you think? I'll throw Tampa Bay your way. Good luck. The San Francisco Giants, seems all right. And then the Red Sox. What do you think about those 3?
So Tampa Bay, you never invest in the reliever that led them in saves the year before. So Kittredge is a fade. They'll figure somebody else out. And I joked on Reliever Recon that this would be the perfect team to sign Hector Neris, and all of a sudden he'll become an absolute stud in the 9th inning because they'll hone his arsenal and he'll just take off. But Jake McGee, I don't think he was fully healthy, especially because in the playoff game, they didn't bring him in to face back-to-back lefties. They left Doval in there, which was great that they trusted Doval to that point. But I was like, there's no way that McGee was 100%. But Doval was another guy I talked about on The Athletic as someone I wanted to watch all season long. The Red Sox, I think they have to do something. Barnes has always struggled with command, and that second half was scary.
Yeah. So if you had to, let's say the Red Sox don't do anything, who do you think starts the year? Would it be Garrett Whitlock?
Well, they're saying they want him in the rotation, him and Houck.
Sheesh. All right.
So
well.
unless and they already lost Rodriguez, so unless they sign 2 starters, because Whitlock came up as a starter, so that's he's even said he would like to get back to doing it. So we would have to watch that very, very closely. Whitlock was their best reliever in September, no question. But if he goes in rotation, that gives Barnes the pathway back.
They've got to do something. Like, I don't know what it's going to be. They got to sign someone. They have to trade for someone. Like the Red Sox. You cannot go into 2022 saying that you want to compete with Matt Barnes again as your closer. I don't think so. Let's take a look here at these early 2022 relief pitcher rankings from Scotty. They're live on the site, cbssports.com/fantasy/baseball. Top 5. Not really many surprises here. Josh Hader at number 1, Liam Hendricks is 2nd, Emmanuel Clase 3rd, Raisel Iglesias is 4th, and then we have Kenley Jansen rounding out the top 5. Greg, what do you think about this aggressive rank? We talked about Class A, but Class A in the top 3, what do you think about that? How aggressive that is?
I'm okay with it. It's the changing times, and we're ranking for this year, not based on past pedigree. Here's a fun stat for you. His last 32 appearances, 32.2 innings pitched, 0.28 ERA, 0.55 WHIP, 33 strikeouts, 2 walks.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, and for Class A,
last 32 appearances. I mean, so he throws a 102 mile per hour cutter that's a bowling ball, and here's the thing: if he ever gets more movement on his slider, then the strikeout rate's going to go up. So, I mean, you're still getting in on the ground floor on a 24-year-old kid that just throws heat.
All right, Scott, I think you've got a believer. You got a believer in me. You got a believer in Greg.
Somehow that 0.28 ERA, I'm more impressed by that. Like if you told me it was a 0 ERA, somehow, how do you get a 0.28 ERA? That's amazing.
To me, it's the 33 strikeouts to 2 walks.
Yeah.
I mean, I love K-BB. I mean, that's just fantastic.
Sure.
Yeah, and look, and talking about Class A, like the biggest knock on him, coming up and joining their bullpen was command. Was he going to struggle too much with the walks? And as you highlighted there, not an issue for him down the stretch. 6 through 10 in the rankings, we have Ryan Presley, Edwin Diaz, Jordan Romano, Craig Kimbrel, and Aroldis Chapman. And again, we spoke a lot about these names here. They all seem rock solid. We'll see if Romano can hold on to the role. Aroldis Chapman, Scott, you didn't really talk about him much. Is there anything that you'd like to add? Like putting him in the top 10, I feel like it's just because like there's no one else to put there, right?
Well, I'm a little worried that he's fading. Yeah. He did bounce back after those initial struggles with the sticky substance band, as so many other pitchers did. So I don't really think he's like on the verge of losing his job, but he's not. He may not be. He may be a little more worrisome than we've known him to be throughout his career. And yeah, I mean, ranking him behind Craig Kimbrel, who has obvious concerns, I think spells that out. But at the same time, I mean, Chapman's the Yankees closer, and he's a closer who's probably going to strike out 100 batters or close to it. So, yeah, I can only nitpick so much.
Greg, where you at on Chapman? Fade?
For me right now, I'm worried about the whip. Yes. Like you, I watched a lot of Yankee games, and he's not much of a poker player. Like, there's nights you see him and he starts throwing the ball and like, oh, he's on tonight. And there was other nights where the sweat was just pouring and he was searching, trying to find. I remember he was trying to throw. He couldn't throw his fastball for strikes. He was weaving sliders in there. The whip, like I said, I think it was like the Yankees staff was always the PR was like, oh, he had this whip after this ERA after this point, but it was a 1.30 whip. He doesn't do well with traffic on the bases. And he is a free agent at the end of this year. So if anything did happen to the Yankees this year, they could deal him again. So I don't know. I'm going to stay away.
Well, let me throw this stat out there. And from September 1st to the end of the season, 14 appearances for Chapman, 2.03 ERA, 25 strikeouts and 13 in the third innings. So that's okay. When I say he got back on track, I mean that was a very impressive one. 7 walks in the 13 and third innings. Yeah, he walks a lot of guys. He always has.
Yeah. That's
so what worries me is traffic. That's all I'm worried about with him. Command and traffic. If that stuff starts to, again, he's one of the safest people because Boone's going to put him in the 9th inning almost to a fault. So you have that. I'm just saying from a ratio standpoint and other stuff, I'm just nervous. I totally understand why you're ranking him there, and it makes sense. I'm just saying I'm just nervous.
Sure.
Yeah, over 6 walks per 9 for Aroldis Chapman. Like, it's usually 4, but 6 is really high for any reliever. 11 through 15 in the ranks. We have Ranger Suarez again, pops up here as a SPARP starting pitcher, as relief pitcher. We have Giovanni Gallegos at 12, Camilo Doval at 13, Will Smith at 14, Scott Barlow at 15. Scott, I gotta say, the Will Smith ranking, it seems a little bit low. Like, if you wanted to move him ahead of Chapman and get him inside the top 10, I wouldn't have an issue with that.
I don't know. Does Will Smith really have more job security than Chapman? I feel like
it's probably the same, right? To start the year.
I don't know. Like, Will Smith seemed like he was on the verge of losing his job at so many points last year. Finished with a 3.44 ERA, a 4.17 FIP. Really vulnerable to the long ball, and he has some walk issues too. I do think, other than Tyler Matzik, he's the most talented reliever the Braves have. But I don't want to denigrate him too much because obviously he got 37 saves this past year, and they never did move off of him, and he's signed to a big contract, so he'll probably hold the role all season. But he has some shortcomings that make it so. I don't think he deserves to be ranked as a number 1 reliever.
All right. I mean, it's all about the money too, Scotty. Remember, this guy's getting a big chunk of change. So usually it shouldn't factor into decisions, but sometimes it does. It's like part of the politics in baseball.
I want to point out Ranger Suarez. I have him 11th here. That's for Roto specifically. And in points leagues, I have Ranger Suarez as the number 5 reliever after just Hader, Hendricks, Clase, and Iglesias.
Yep, which I think makes perfect sense. Greg, I wanted to ask you about Scott Barlow, number 15 here in the rankings. And the Royals situation was another one, which was kind of a mess. I mean, eventually Scott Barlow emerged, and it seems like the team had confidence in him eventually. But there's a few names there that seem pretty talented, right? Like Josh Stallmont seems like, he's a pretty good reliever. So what are you thinking about the Royals situation?
What we have to watch with him, and this is one of those situations that, Scott was talking about earlier, is, how long do we hold on to a guy or this, that, and the other? They had a lot of injuries in the second half, so that actually gave, Barlow he had the role for a change instead of being the Paul Sewald of that bullpen. He actually got to be the guy, and he did well with it. He's always been a talented reliever. So, I'm okay with starting him there, but we have to see what Kansas City says, because last year they were another team that was adamant that we don't really have a closer. We're just going to play matchups. So, Frank against the Tigers, you got the 7th inning, but Scott against the Angels, you get the 7th inning, because that's what kind of the lineup we're anticipating. So Stallman could be a sleeper this year. He could be a guy that surprises. If Kansas City, I think they want to contend, but if they fall off, they could deal Barlow because he's in his arbitration window. Then that could open a pathway to other people. We'll have to see. They're saying they want to sign some veteran relievers, but they're not going to go to the top of the food chain. I could see like them targeting a guy like Corey Knebel or somebody of that ilk, but I don't think they'll go at the top end of the food chain to try and get like a Raisel Iglesias.
16 through 20 in the rankings, we have Mark Melancon, Luis Severino, Cal Quantrill, Drew Steckenrider, and Dylan Floro out there with the Miami Marlins. Scott, we see a few names here that pop up. I assume Severino and Cal Quantrill will both have SPARP eligibility. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, otherwise I wouldn't rank them in relief pitcher, Frank. Severino will be only relief pitcher eligible to begin the season.
Okay.
So we expect him to be in the Yankees rotation, and by May he should have starting pitcher eligibility again. Those two, obviously, like I was saying for Suarez, Severino and Quantrill move up in points leagues. I actually have them 12 and 13 at relief pitcher and points leagues, right after Aroldis Chapman and Craig Kimbrel come Severino and Quantrill. Melancon, if he does sign somewhere where it looks like he's obviously going to be the closer, I don't know how much I could move him up, really. You could argue as high as 12th, overtaking Giovanni Gallegos because of the concerns for him. But obviously, I think Gallegos is a much better pitcher than Melancon. So there's a good possibility Melancon ends up being undervalued again, even as the MLB saves leader. Steckenrider, we talked about him. Dylan Floro. Don Mattingly is a manager who's always liked the dedicated closer. And he's, in 2020, it was Brandon Kinsler, a guy kind of like Dylan Floro, that, veteran guy, relies on weak contact more than missing bats. Floro looked like he really stabilized that role down the stretch last year after they traded, I'm having trouble with names, the guy they traded to the Astros, who was their closer at the start of the year. Yemi Garcia, yeah. After they traded him, and we didn't know what direction they were going to go, Dylan Floro didn't seem like the obvious candidate, but how many saves did he get in September? He got a bunch of saves in September. So provided the Marlins don't bring in anybody else, I think Dylan Floro could be a sneaky pick in the late rounds, because it seems like Mattingly has trust in him. Let me see how many saves it was. So from August 26th on, Floro got 10 saves. It's a lot of saves.
Yeah, that's pretty massive. So if you picked him up around the trade deadline, that was in your Roto League, that was a potential league winner just based on the saves alone, right? Getting that volume that late in the season. Scott, I actually texted you while we were recording right now. I heard in the background. Is there? I didn't actually, but I want to know, like, is there any other sparks that we need to know about? Like, I mentioned Severino, we mentioned Ranger Suarez, Cal Quantrill. I think Carlos Hernandez is going to be SPARP eligible. I think same thing for Christian Javier. We don't know if he's going to be back in the rotation or not, but
that's the thing. There are a few guys like that who it's up in the air what role they'll have. Christian Javier, who you mentioned, Michael Kopech of the White Sox, could be very exciting if they move him to the rotation.
Oh yeah.
Nate Pearson of the Blue Jays, Alex Reyes, who we talked about. That's really the risk reward quartet there. All former. Well, Christian Javier was an elite prospect, but he put up huge numbers in the minors, and we've already seen him have success in the majors. So that four is the one I'm looking at the most closely. We just have to see how those roles shake out. Mm-hmm. I guess Garrett Whitlock could be part of that group if the Red Sox are serious about moving him to the rotation. Further down, you have Aaron Ashby of the Brewers, AJ Puck of the Athletics. I guess potentially Dinelson Lamet of the Padres. I don't know if they're going to try him in the rotation or not, but of course we've been really excited about him in the past. Drew Rasmussen of the Rays, if they stick with him as a rotation option, he could be pretty useful. And I think those are the big ones, or even medium-sized ones. No, the ones you need to care about in any capacity.
Yeah, we'll go with like a small to medium on the the t-shirt size scale in terms of those sparps there. Greg, any other names that we talked about a bunch of names today? Is there anyone else that we haven't talked about that maybe you're excited to, if you're doing early drafts, maybe take a shot on a little bit later on, or maybe someone that no one's talking about that you think is going to get an opportunity early in the season to be a team's closer? Anyone stand out for you?
We don't know. The hardest thing now is like there's just so much gray area. There's guys like that I like super late. We're doing these goofy things. Like we don't know what's going to happen in Colorado. We don't know what's going to happen in a few places. So like if you're going to take David Bednar, you're almost going to have to handcuff him with Chris Stratton because they were using both of them in September for saves. So you can't just get
they are back to back in my rankings, Bednar and Stratton.
Yeah, you almost have to. You just kind of piggyback them and see what happens with how that goes. We want to see what's going to happen in that Washington bullpen. I like Scott Efros as a sleeper with Chicago Cubs. No one seems to be talking about him, but Wick and Hewer did nothing to distinguish themselves as the closer in that bullpen. We're watching what happens with the Dodgers. Does Trinan get in there? Does that mean we're looking at Gratterall maybe eventually down the road, or Vesia? I kind of like Gregory Soto this year, almost as a poor man's Aroldis Chapman. I think if he can get a little more swinging strike in his game, he's got the velo and he's got youth on his side, unlike some of the people we've been talking about.
Now that was a weird one because in October, AJ Hinch, early October, like right after the
finally said he's my closer.
Yeah, nobody declares closers anymore, and AJ Hinch is going to be the guy to do it, and it's going to be Gregory Soto when the Tigers are looking to add this offseason. Like, I don't trust anything about that. But and I had Michael Fulmer ranked ahead until I saw that. So I don't know. That's a weird. Can I ask you about a couple guys specifically?
Sure.
Kind of rapid fire here.
Deep flyer, like from round 49. I think Art Warren will get a handful of saves this year for the Reds. But yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Who did you say for the Reds?
Art Warren.
Art Warren.
If we can get him healthy,
Art Warren. Yeah, Art Warren. Yeah, and there's also Austin Warren of the Angels. We don't know what the Angels are doing in the ninth inning. They're both the A Warrens are both very interesting. Though
and I also like Jorge Alcala of the Twins. I do feel at some point they're going to trade Taylor Rogers. Alcala in the second half of the year was absolutely filthy. He's got a very good changeup and a live arm. He's another guy that if he can stay healthy, I think could be a second half surger in saves.
Okay, so I was going to ask you about Taylor Rogers. You think probably traded at some point, but you're presuming he's the Twins closer to start out?
To start, I would think. I don't think they're going to go out and spend a bunch of money in free agency for a closer. So, I think they'll go to arbitration with him, but they were trying to trade him at the deadline. So I think they'll be trading him sooner rather than later.
All right. Just kind of rapid fire here. Rangers, I'm thinking Joe Barlow for now.
Probably. I wanted to get more swing and strike out of him. If Jonathan Hernandez is healthy, that's someone we have to monitor.
Lou Trevino for the Athletics.
I suppose, but that might be a bullpen I avoid depending on who they add. That's just a mess. If they're going to be in a massive rebuild, I'm going to avoid.
Plus, they might end up trading Trevino himself.
Mm-hmm.
I guess did I hit? Was that already everybody? I thought I had a couple more names lined up here. Okay, well, we're running out of time, so I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, hey, we hit on a bunch. Look, if we didn't hit all the teams,
happy to come back in March.
Hey, look, we'll have to have you back on, man. Once a few things shake out a little bit, we get some signings here. Again, he is Greg Jewett. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at GJEWETT9. Again, Greg Jewett. You can find all of his work over on his Reliever Recon Patreon page and over on The Athletic as well. Greg, we appreciate you coming on, buddy.
Thank you both. I'm floored and honored to be here. This is always one of the gold standards of fantasy baseball podcasts. So all the guys on Recon were cheering when I told them you invited me on.
Nice. Yeah, I appreciate that. They probably don't realize that I host this podcast now, so I don't know if it's still the gold standard, but I do appreciate that. For Scott and Greg, I am Frank. Thank you all for listening and watching Fantasy Baseball today. We'll be back again on Tuesday. Bye-bye.